Record 42, Side 1, Lesson number 42, the 42nd lesson, Practical section, British culture, past and present.
I think you ought to tell us something of the cultural life of Britain and its people.
Yes, that might prove interesting. Let's begin with basic education itself. I think we mentioned in a previous conversation that attendance at an elementary school became compulsory for all children in 1870. Britain's cultural life goes further back than that, of course.
Do you mean that by this act, fields of interest previously unknown to the masses were opened up to a much larger proportion of the population than before?
That's it exactly, Pierre. Culture can hardly be typical of a country unless it is appreciated by a large part of the population, whether it be in language, painting, music, architecture, sculpture, or any other of the arts.
Do the majority of people appreciate the arts today in Great Britain?
That's largely a question of education, not merely at school, but more important, in the home.
Do you feel that British people today, speaking generally of course, are culturally minded or not?
That's too big a question, really. Today, people have too little time, save for the reading of books, unless we consider the enthusiast, to take an active part in art appreciation. People, through the medium of television, the radio, and even the cinema, are continually stimulated to interest themselves in some field of culture. The seed is planted and often bears fruit.
On the continent, particularly in France and Italy, more attention is given in school to basic knowledge of the arts than I believe you do in Great Britain.
Yes, but how often does the pupil learn to appreciate what he studies? I am sure the percentage of wastage is very high even in those countries.
We seem to be getting rather far from our starting point. We are treading on quicksands now, with little chance of getting to the other side.
You're quite right, Pierre. Well, John, you begin, will you? And please don't mind if we interrupt you now and again.
Let us look at the situation today. There isn't sufficient time to discuss the history of art, except to cite a few names from the past. Music in England was at its greatest in Tudor times, and gave us names like Bird and later Purcell, whose music is still commonly played today.
The tradition of English music in the 18th century was continued by Handel, a German composer, wasn't it?
Yes, but after Handel there were no great names in English music until Elgar and Delius were born last century. They wrote music in many forms and are rightly famous for their contribution to the art.
Present-day English composers have made a great impression on music. People like Vaughan Williams, Walton, and Britten, to mention only a few.
Are there any great names in the field of painting and sculpture today? One seems to hear so little of artists, unless one closely follows developments.
Today there are a number of noteworthy artists, among them Francis Bacon, Graham Sutherland, whose latest work is to be seen in the new Coventry Cathedral, built to replace the one destroyed by bombing during the war, and Henry Moore, who is famous as a sculptor and is reputed to be a very good one.
Sculpture hasn't any great names in the past, has it, John?
No, there weren't any to match the great Italians. But in the field of architecture there is evidence that although simple, there was great skill shown in building during the Middle Ages, and the churches and towers were practical and beautiful.
However small the contribution may be in some fields of art, Britain has certainly made a tremendous contribution to Western culture in the field of literature.
There is almost a steady literary production from the 14th century onwards, and there are remains of many Anglo-Saxon poems written long before that time.
The modern era, which we may say began with Chaucer, 1345 to 1400, has been rich in great names as well as great works.
Chaucer's Canterbury Tales are a little difficult to understand, but one can clearly see the outline of modern English even at that time.
What a pity there isn't more time. Perhaps we can discuss it more fully another time.
At least we may mention some of the greatest names, names which are known throughout the world today. Malory, Spenser, Shakespeare, Marlowe, Ben Jonson, Dryden, Milton, Donne, Pope, Swift.
Yes, there are too many to be mentioned here, but we mustn't forget great men of the last century, like Byron, Keats and Shelley in the field of poetry, and Thackeray, Dickens, Scott, Trollope, and Hardy, to mention but a few of the novelists.
I must try to read some of those in the near future, and so improve my knowledge of Britain and her culture.
Side 2, Grammatical section. Verb constructions, second part. In Lesson 39, the simplest forms of verb construction in English were presented. The constructions given in this lesson follow up the preceding group and will also serve to refresh your memory and stimulate you to look in the preceding lessons for some examples of all the constructions we have presented to date. 1. The first construction we shall consider in this lesson is that of subject plus verb plus noun or pronoun plus adjective. We left the door open. Pushed the table clear. The children laid themselves flat on the ground. John likes his tea sweet, but drinks coffee without sugar. Mary had better keep the baby warm on such a cold day. When the object is long, the adjective may be placed before it, and where the object is a clause beginning with that, or an infinitive with to, the adjective is placed between the verb and its object, and in the latter form, preparatory it is used. Here are some examples of these. The boys broke open all the boxes of chocolates they had found in the house. She painted blue and yellow the egg that the brown hen had laid, and then had it for her supper. The arrival of his friends made it impossible to go to the theatre as he had hoped. The boys washed themselves clean to go to the party. Some verbs used with this construction are bake, boil, fill, find, get, hold, make, paint, render, see, wash, wish. 2. Here now is a more simple form which, however, is more restricted in use. Perhaps it may seem obvious to the foreign student. The construction is subject plus verb plus noun or pronoun plus noun. They christened the baby George. The husband and wife found their new acquaintances really delightful people. Mr. Smith nominated Jones chairman of the meeting. Verbs used in this way are appoint, choose, designate, leave, make, nominate. 3. A construction which is more commonly used and heard is the one we are about to consider. Subject plus verb plus noun or pronoun plus past participle. He didn't have his friends invited. Father tried to make himself heard above the din. They want their shoes repaired in a hurry. We prefer our fruit stewed. Other verbs used in this construction are feel, find, like, see, wish, get. 4. You may remember the verbs taking an adverbial particle which we studied in Lesson 24. Here again are some examples to refresh your memory. The pronoun object must always be placed before the particle, the noun before or after, as the speaker desires. They sent the books away by post. I wind up my watch every morning. She wound it up before going to bed. Put your coat on, it's raining. In this construction, we may also find all kinds of adverbials used: time, place, manner, infinitive phrases, and even adverbial clauses. They are, however, very rarely found between the verb and its object. I saw them walking together in the garden. There was no one at home, so we slipped the letter under the door. Although he was an engineer, they employed him as a mechanic. The police car chased the bandits for 20 minutes before catching them. She expects me to do everything here. Father treats us as if we were still children. 5. Another very common construction is the following: subject plus verb plus that clause. That is very often omitted. We believe they will come again next year. I noticed your friend didn't seem very happy. Was there anything wrong? It was suggested that we might reconsider the matter in the light of the new evidence. I wonder you did not jump for joy. Some of the more common verbs met with in this construction are admit, confess, demand, expect, fear, hope, know, mean, propose, see, suppose, think, understand, wish. Sometimes, when a definite person is indicated, we use the same construction, but modified as follows: subject plus verb plus to plus noun or pronoun plus that clause. He confessed to her that he no longer loved her. The president proposed to the board that the meeting should be adjourned. The parents explained to the headmaster that their children had too many lessons to do at home. Now let us look at a further construction which is similar to the last, but is used without the to before the noun or pronoun. Subject plus verb plus noun or pronoun plus that clause. The main verbs found in this construction are assure, inform, promise, remind, satisfy, teach, tell, warn. He assured me that everything was in order. I told the meeting that the money would be paid before the end of the week. The policeman warned the motorist that he must drive more carefully.